The copy. I should have known something was wrong when I found my own boot prints leading away from camp. Except I was still wearing both my boots, and I'd been asleep in my tent for the last 6 hours. The prints were fresh in the morning dew, still sharp in the mud, and they led straight toward the tree line where something had been scratching messages into the bark all night. Messages that spelled out my name, over and over, in letters that looked like they'd been carved with human fingernails that were way too long. My name is David Ross, and I'm a wilderness photographer. At least, I was. After what happened in the Navajo Nation last month, I'm not sure I'll ever pick up a camera again, or step foot in the wilderness without an army behind me. The assignment seemed routine enough. National Geographic wanted shots of the Four Corners region for an upcoming feature on sacred lands. 3 weeks of solo camping, capturing the untouched beauty of the high desert. I'd done dozens of similar shoots across 6 continents. Remote locations were my specialty. Isolation was where I did my best work. No distractions, no schedules, just me and the landscape in its purest form. I'd been to dangerous places before. The Amazon rainforest during jaguar mating season, the Siberian tundra in winter, the Australian outback during drought season. I'd survived equipment failures, aggressive wildlife, flash floods, and even a close encounter with human traffickers in Myanmar. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what was waiting in those red rock canyons. The first week went perfectly. Stunning sunrise shots over Monument Valley, the light painting those ancient monoliths in shades of gold and crimson that made my heart race. Dramatic storm clouds rolling across the painted desert, lightning striking the earth like divine punishment, ancient petroglyphs catching golden hour light, 1,000-year-old messages carved into stone by people who understood this land better than I ever would. My editor, Jennifer, was going to lose her mind when she saw these shots. I'd already uploaded previews via satellite internet, and her response was immediate. "Holy shit, David. These are career-defining. Keep shooting." I was ahead of schedule and feeling confident as I set up my base camp near a cluster of red rock formations about 40 miles from the nearest road. The kind of isolation that most people would find terrifying. But for me, it was paradise. No cell towers, no light pollution, no human noise except the wind singing through the canyons. The first night, I cooked freeze-dried beef stroganoff over my camp stove and reviewed the day's shots on my laptop. The silence was so complete it felt like a physical presence. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring because they're straining to hear something. Anything. Just the distant call of a great horned owl and the soft whisper of wind through sage brush. That's when I started noticing the sounds at night. Footsteps. Circling my tent. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone was studying my campsite. The crunch of boots on loose gravel. The soft whistle of fabric brushing against brush. But every time I unzipped the tent flap to look, nothing. Just empty desert bathed in starlight, and the distant howl of coyotes echoing off canyon walls. I told myself it was just the wind moving through the rocks, creating acoustic illusions. Or maybe a curious mule deer investigating my scent. Wildlife was always checking out campsites, especially in areas where humans rarely ventured. Hell, I'd woken up to find bear paw prints around my tent in Yellowstone. But deer don't walk in perfect circles, and they sure as hell don't stop walking the exact moment you try to look at them. The second night, I set up my motion-activated trail camera pointed at the perimeter of my camp. If something was out there, I'd have proof in the morning. I also kept my Glock 19 loaded and within reach. Yeah, I carry protection in remote areas. Learned that lesson the hard way during a grisly encounter in Alaska that nearly cost me my life. Around 2 a.m., I heard my own voice calling from outside the tent. David, come out here. You need to see this." My blood went cold. The voice was perfect. Too perfect. Every inflection, every tone, even the slight rasp I get when I've been talking all day and my throat's dry. It was me, calling to myself from the darkness beyond my tent, with the exact cadence I used when I was excited about a shot. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my flashlight and pistol. The metal felt cold and reassuring in my palm. I unzipped the tent flap just wide enough to peer out and swept the LED beam across the campsite. Empty. Nothing but my photography equipment wrapped in protective covers and the dying embers of my campfire casting weak orange light on the surrounding rocks. "Hello?" I called out, feeling ridiculous even as the word left my mouth. "Is someone there?" Silence. The kind of absolute quiet that makes you question whether you imagined the whole thing. Then, from about 50 yards away, near the base of a towering sandstone formation, my own voice again. "David, why won't you come out? I'm trying to show you something important. Something you need to photograph." The thing is, I hadn't spoken those words. I was hearing my voice say things I'd never said, with perfect clarity and familiar enthusiasm. Something was out there, using my voice like a recording device, playing back words and combinations I'd never used. I stayed in my tent, pistol aimed at the entrance, listening to my own voice call to me from different directions until sunrise, sometimes pleading, "David, please, you're missing the shot of a lifetime." Sometimes angry, "David, don't be a coward. Get out here." Sometimes whispering secrets I'd never told anyone. Secrets that thing couldn't possibly know. Like the time I'd accidentally started a forest fire in Montana and never reported it. Or the real reason my marriage to Rebecca fell apart. Not the career demands I told everyone, but the drinking problem I'd hidden for 3 years. Things buried so deep in my mind that I rarely thought about them myself. When morning came, that's when I found the boot prints. My size 11 Merrell hiking boots had left a clear trail leading from my tent to the tree line and back multiple times. At least 6 different trips, judging by the overlapping impressions in the sandy soil. The prints were deep, like whoever made them was carrying extra weight. Maybe my camera gear, or a body. But here's the thing that made my stomach drop. The prints coming back to camp were different. Longer, wider, like the feet inside my boots had. Grown. The returning prints showed toes that extended beyond where mine should end. Heel impressions that were deeper and more pronounced, as if whatever was wearing my boots had developed claws. Following the trail, I found where something had been busy all night while I cowered in my tent. 27 pine trees, each one carved with my name. David, gouged into the bark in letters 3 inches tall, the cuts fresh and oozing sap that smelled like Christmas morning. But these weren't made with a knife. The carving tool? Fingernails. I could see the nail marks in the wood, 4 parallel scratches per letter, and they were wrong. Human fingernails, but too long, too sharp, leaving gouges that went impossibly deep into the bark. Some of the scratches were clean, others ragged, as if the nails had grown and changed shape during the carving process. At the base of each tree, tufts of hair, dark brown, exactly like mine, with the same natural wave pattern I'd inherited from my father. But when I ran it between my fingers, it felt oily, unnatural, like synthetic hair made from something that had never been alive, or hair that had been processed through something's digestive system. I checked my trail camera, hands shaking as I reviewed the footage. 8 hours of recording, motion sensor triggering dozens of times throughout the night, but every single clip showed the same thing. Empty campsite, no movement except wind-blown sagebrush. Whatever had been out there either knew about the camera and avoided it, or it didn't register on digital sensors. That's when I should have packed up and left. Any rational person would have, but I'm not rational when I'm scared. I get stubborn, defiant. My grandfather always said I had more pride than sense, and he was right. Besides, I needed this assignment. The magazine was paying enough to cover my rent for 6 months, and freelance photography wasn't exactly a stable income stream. So I stayed. Big mistake. I spent that day photographing the area where I'd found the carved trees, documenting everything with clinical precision. The hair samples went into labeled bags. I photographed the nail marks from multiple angles, using macro lenses to capture every detail. If something was stalking me, I was going to have evidence. But as the sun set and shadows began stretching across the desert floor, my confidence evaporated. The landscape that had seemed beautiful and mysterious in daylight became menacing in the twilight. Every rock formation looked like a crouching figure. Every shadow could hide something watching me. I built my campfire larger than usual, creating a circle of light that extended 20 feet in every direction. I kept my pistol in my lap and my camera ready, switching between night vision and thermal imaging lenses. If something came for me, I'd document its approach. The third night changed everything. I was editing photos on my laptop, adjusting exposure and contrast on the day's shots, when I heard footsteps approaching camp. Normal human footsteps this time. None of that supernatural circling. The steady rhythm of boots on gravel, someone walking with purpose and confidence. I looked up from my screen to see a figure walking into the firelight, and my heart nearly stopped. It was me, not similar to me, not someone who looked like me. It was me, down to the scar on my chin from a childhood bicycle accident, the way I held my left shoulder slightly higher than my right from an old climbing injury, even the exact same clothes I was wearing, down to the small tear in my jacket sleeve that I'd gotten on a thorn bush earlier that day. Standing 10 feet away was my perfect duplicate, smiling at me like we were old friends meeting after years apart. "Hey there," it said in my voice, complete with a slight Midwest accent I'd never quite lost. "Mind if I sit down? We need to talk." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. This thing, this copy of me, was standing in my campfire light like the most natural thing in the world. It looked real, solid, human, but something in its eyes was empty, like looking into mirrors that reflected nothing, or into the eyes of a shark. It moved with uncanny precision, every gesture familiar because they were my gestures. The way I adjusted my weight when standing, the unconscious habit of running my hand through my hair when nervous, even the specific way I smiled when trying to put someone at ease. "You're probably wondering what I am," it continued, settling down across the fire from me with fluid grace. "The Navajo have a word for it. Yi-Naud-Lushi, shapeshifter, Skinwalker. But you can just call me you. What do you want?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice barely audible over the crackling fire. It smiled wider, and I noticed its teeth were just slightly too sharp, filed to points like a predator's. "I want your life, David. Your memories, your experiences, your identity. You've lived such an interesting life. All those travels, all those adventures, all those relationships you've built and then abandoned for the next assignment. I want to taste what that feels like." "You're not real," I said, gripping my camera like a weapon. "This is just stress, or altitude sickness, or, oh, I'm very real." The thing reached into the fire with its bare hand and pulled out a burning stick. No pain, no reaction, no smell of burning flesh. Just held the flame like it was a flower, the fire dancing between its fingers without leaving a mark. "I've been watching you for weeks, learning you, copying your voice, your mannerisms, your memories. Did you know you still have nightmares about your sister's accident? The one when you were 12? My blood turned to ice. Sarah's accident. I'd never told anyone the details, never even written about it in the journal I kept sporadically. It was buried so deep in my mind that I rarely thought about it myself, and when I did, I immediately pushed it away. How do you? I know everything about you, David. Every secret, every shame, every moment of joy and terror. I've been inside your head while you sleep, downloading everything that makes you, you. The way you blame yourself for Sarah's death, even though you were just a child. The guilt you carry about leaving Rebecca when she needed you most. The fear that you'll never be more than a tourist in other people's lives. The fire seemed to dim as it spoke, shadows growing longer and darker around us. I could hear things moving in the darkness beyond the firelight. More footsteps, but wrong somehow. Too many legs, or legs bending in directions they shouldn't. The sound of joints popping and reforming. The question is, it continued, twirling the burning stick between its fingers like a baton. Are you going to make this easy or difficult? I can take your life by force, but it's so much cleaner when the original simply disappears. I ran, grabbed my pistol and sprinted into the darkness, leaving everything behind. My camera equipment, my laptop, 3 weeks of irreplaceable photos. The thing's laughter followed me. My own laughter, but wrong. Too high, too long, echoing off the rocks like a chorus of mad versions of myself. I made it maybe half a mile before I realized I was being herded. Every direction I turned, I could see shapes moving in my peripheral vision, glimpses of myself, dozens of myself, all slightly different. One walking on all fours like an animal, its spine bent at impossible angles. Another with arms that bent the wrong way, elbows hyperextending with wet clicking sounds. A third with my face but eyes that reflected the moonlight like an animal's, pupils glowing green in the darkness. They were driving me toward something, using coordinated movements like a wolf pack hunting elk, appearing on my flanks when I tried to change direction, forcing me down a specific path through the maze of rock formations. I found myself in a box canyon with high walls and only one way out. The perfect trap. As I stumbled into the open space, gasping for breath, my legs burning from the desperate run, I understood what was happening. This wasn't just one Skinwalker. It was a whole pack of them, and they'd all taken my form, studying me, learning me, preparing to replace me entirely. "Welcome to the audition," said a voice behind me. I spun around to see myself standing at the canyon entrance, but this version was wrong in subtle ways. My face, but the proportions were slightly off, like looking at myself in a funhouse mirror. My voice, but with an accent I'd never had, a slight southern drawl that didn't belong. My body, but moving with a predator's grace I'd never possessed. Each step calculated and precise. "Audition?" I gasped, raising my pistol with hands that shook so badly I could barely aim. "To see which one of us gets to be the real David Ross," it said, circling me slowly like a cat stalking prey. "You see, we've all been practicing, all been becoming you, but there can only be one original walking around in your life, and frankly, you're not the best version of yourself we've created." From the shadows around the canyon walls, more versions of me emerged. A David with pale skin and black eyes like holes in his skull. A David whose joints bent backwards, walking on hands and feet like a spider. A David whose smile was just a row of sharp teeth, far too many teeth for a human mouth. A David who walked without making any sound at all, his feet never quite touching the ground. "The problem with being human," the first one continued, "is that you're so limited, constrained by physics, by biology, by morality. We've improved on the design, enhanced it, made it more efficient." I raised my pistol. But which one do you shoot when they all look like you? Stay back. I'll kill all of you. They laughed. My laugh multiplied and distorted until it sounded like madness itself. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, building into a crescendo that made my teeth ache. With what? One of them asked, the one with too many teeth. 6 bullets? There are 23 of us here, and we heal so quickly from conventional wounds. I looked around the canyon walls and felt my sanity starting to crack. They were right. Dozens of versions of myself staring down at me, some hanging from the rock face like spiders, others crouched in impossible positions, all wearing my face like a mask that didn't quite fit. But we're feeling generous tonight, the first one said, checking my own watch on its wrist. We'll give you a sporting chance. Run. If you can make it out of our territory before sunrise, we'll let you live. You can even keep being David Ross. What's left of him, and if I don't make it? Its smile widened, revealing teeth that were definitely not mine. Longer, sharper, designed for tearing flesh. Then we'll wear your skin while it's still warm, and your life becomes ours to live. Your apartment, your job, your friends. They'll never know we replaced you. We'll be better boyfriends to Rebecca than you ever were. Better sons to your parents, better friends to your colleagues. I didn't wait to hear more. I bolted for the canyon entrance, but the things wearing my face just watched me run. No pursuit. Yet, they were playing with me, like cats with a mouse, letting me think I had a chance before they closed in for the kill. The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. I ran through the desert in the darkness, stumbling over rocks, tearing my clothes on thorns and barbed wire from old fence lines, following the North Star toward what I hoped was civilization. My lungs burned with each breath, the thin desert air not providing enough oxygen for the desperate pace I was setting. But I couldn't slow down. Behind me, I could hear them, not chasing exactly, but following, herding me, keeping me moving in the direction they wanted. The terrain was brutal in the darkness. What looked like open ground in daylight became a maze of hidden gullies, unexpected drop-offs, and ankle-breaking prairie dog holes. I fell more times than I could count, skinning my knees and palms on sharp rocks, once nearly breaking my wrist when I caught myself against a hidden boulder. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of them in the moonlight, my own form loping alongside me just outside my vision, running on 2 legs but moving like a wolf, with that fluid, predatory gait that no human should possess. Other times I'd hear my own voice calling from different directions, trying to confuse me, trying to get me to run in circles until exhaustion took me down. David, over here! I found the road. David, this way. There's water. David, I'm hurt. Please help me. David, stop running. You're only making this harder on yourself. Each time, I forced myself to keep running straight, following the constellation Polaris like a beacon of hope. Whatever these things were, they were getting desperate as dawn approached. Their voices became more urgent, more pleading, more like the real me begging for help, but I could tell they were weakening. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking. The calls came less frequently as the hours passed, and when I risked a glance over my shoulder, I could see fewer shapes moving in the darkness behind me. Maybe daylight really did have power over them, like the old legends said. Around 4 a.m., I stumbled across an old mining road. Just 2 tire tracks worn into the desert floor, but it was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. It meant human presence, civilization, a way out of this nightmare. I followed it east, toward where the horizon was just beginning to show the faintest hint of dawn. My water ran out an hour later. I'd been so focused on running that I hadn't rationed it properly, and now my mouth felt like sandpaper. The desert was already starting to heat up, even in the pre-dawn hours, and I knew dehydration would kill me long before the Skinwalkers if I didn't find help soon. That's when I heard the engine. At first, I thought it was just my oxygen-starved brain playing tricks on me. But the sound grew louder, clearer, the distinctive rumble of a diesel engine struggling up a long grade. I crested a small hill and saw the most beautiful sight of my life. Headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness, moving along a paved highway maybe 2 miles ahead. I found strength I didn't know I had, sprinting down the slope toward the road, waving my arms and shouting even though I knew they couldn't hear me yet. The sun was just touching the horizon when I finally reached the highway, a blessed strip of asphalt that connected me back to the human world. I was maybe 100 yards from the road when I heard the howling behind me. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something in between. A sound of pure rage and hunger that made my bones ache and my vision blur. They were done playing games. Dawn was coming, and if they were going to take me, it had to be now. I could hear them coming now. Really coming. No longer bothering to hide their inhuman speed. The sound of claws on rock, of joints bending in ways that human joints shouldn't, of my own voice twisted into something monstrous and desperate. The ground shook with their approach, as if a small earthquake was following me across the desert. I reached the highway just as a semi-truck rounded the bend, its headlights washing over me like salvation itself. I threw myself into the road, waving my arms, screaming for help. The driver hit his brakes, air horn blaring, 18 wheels locking up and skidding on asphalt with a sound like the world ending. As the truck stopped just inches from where I stood, I turned to look back at the desert and saw nothing. Empty landscape, peaceful in the morning light. No signs of the things that had been chasing me. No evidence of the nightmare I'd just lived through. Just rolling hills covered in sage, brush, and the distant silhouettes of red rock formations. The trucker, big guy named Pete from Oklahoma, with arms like tree trunks and a beard that reached his chest, thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Dehydration, maybe, or a bad reaction to altitude. He radioed ahead to the next truck stop, made sure paramedics would be waiting, and gave me water from his cooler while asking gentle questions about what had happened. I tried to tell him the truth, but the words sounded insane even to me. Shapeshifters, copies of myself, things that could mimic human voices and appearances. He nodded politely and kept offering water, treating me like a victim of exposure who was suffering from hallucinations. Pete drove me to the nearest town, a tiny place called Red Mesa, with maybe 300 residents and a volunteer ambulance service. The EMTs checked me over, found me dehydrated and exhausted but otherwise physically fine. They wanted to take me to the hospital in Flagstaff, but I refused. I just wanted to get home, back to civilization, back to a world that made sense. I bought a bus ticket with the emergency credit card I kept in my wallet, leaving behind thousands of dollars in camera equipment in that cursed desert. The gear was insured, I told myself. Some things were more valuable than money. But the 40-hour bus ride back to Phoenix gave me too much time to think, to analyze what had happened, to wonder if maybe I really had suffered some kind of psychotic break brought on by isolation and stress. Nobody believed my story. Hell, I wouldn't have believed it either. The cops in Red Mesa took my report about stolen camping equipment and filed it away without much interest. Insurance companies dealt with wilderness theft claims all the time. My editor, Jennifer, was understanding about the lost photos, sympathetic about my equipment failure in the field. My friends attributed my haggard appearance and jumpiness to a rough camping trip gone wrong. Everyone had rational explanations. Everyone except me. But 3 weeks later, when I was back home in Phoenix, trying to put the pieces of my life back together and forget what had happened in the desert, that's when I knew they'd won. I was at my local coffee shop, the place where I'd been going every morning for 2 years. Same order, same table, same routine that helped maintain some normalcy in my freelance lifestyle. But when I walked in, the barista, Sarah, who knew me by name and had my order memorized, looked at me with confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her friendly smile replaced by polite uncertainty. "It's me," I said, confused by her reaction. "David." "Large coffee, 2 sugars, splash of cream?" She stared at me for a long moment, her brow furrowed like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "I'm sorry, but David was already here this morning. About an hour ago, he got as usual and left." My hand started shaking. "That's impossible. I'm David Ross. I've been coming here for 2 years. Sarah looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the manager's office like she might need backup. "Sir, I know David Ross. He's been coming here for years. We've talked about his photography work, his trips around the world. You look like him, but you're not him. Is this some kind of joke?" I stumbled out of the coffee shop and drove home in a daze, my mind reeling. When I got to my apartment building, there was already someone living in my unit. Someone who looked exactly like me, who had my key, who knew my neighbors by name. Mrs. Henderson from 2B waved at him like she'd known him for years. I checked my bank account from my phone. Closed 3 weeks ago when David Ross moved all his money to a new account at a different bank. My job at the magazine. They said I'd quit via email. Said I was moving to Europe for a new opportunity. My editor, Jennifer, had even thrown a goodbye party for me last weekend. My entire life had been stolen. My identity, my relationships, my history, all of it taken by something wearing my face. The worst part? Nobody believes me. How do you prove you're the real you when someone else is living your life better than you ever did? When they have all your memories, all your mannerisms, all your skills, but improved? I tried going to the police, but what could I tell them? That someone who looks exactly like me has taken over my life? They suggested I see a psychiatrist, get help for what they assumed was a dissociative disorder or identity crisis. I hired a private investigator, spent what little cash I had left trying to gather evidence, but the other David Ross had perfect documentation. Social security card, driver's license, passport, even childhood photos that somehow showed his face instead of mine. It was like reality itself had been rewritten. I'm staying in a motel now, paying cash, trying to figure out what to do next. The Night's Rest Motor Lodge on the outskirts of Phoenix, where the carpet smells like cigarettes and the air conditioner sounds like it's dying. I've been here 6 weeks, working odd jobs for cash, trying to build a new identity from nothing. Sometimes I catch glimpses of myself, the other me, living my life around town, going to my job, dating my ex-girlfriend Rebecca, even visiting my parents for Sunday dinner, living the life I should be living, but better, more confident, more successful, more the human than I ever was. The thing is, he really is better at being me than I am. Rebecca looks happier with him than she ever did with me. My parents are proud of his accomplishments, impressed by his newfound stability. My editor loves his recent work. Apparently, he's producing some of the best photography of his career. And sometimes, late at night in this cheap motel room, I wonder, what if they were right? What if I really am just a pale imitation of what David Ross could be? What if the thing wearing my face is the real me, and I'm just the copy? The doubt eats at me more than the fear. Because if I'm not the real David Ross, then who am I? What am I? Am I even human? Or just another Skinwalker who's forgotten what he really is? I don't sleep much anymore. Can't afford to, because every time I close my eyes, I hear my own voice whispering from the darkness outside my motel room window. We're still out there, David. Still learning. Still copying. And we're getting so much better at being human than you ever were. Last night, I found footprints in the sand outside my room. Size 11 boot prints, just like mine. They circled the building 3 times before leading off into the desert, and next to my door, scratched into the metal with something sharp. My name, carved over and over again in letters that looked like they'd been made with fingernails. I think they found me again. I think they want to finish what they started. If you're out there reading this, if you're listening to this story, do me a favor. Check your footprints tomorrow morning. Make sure they're all yours. Because if you find extras, if you find boot prints leading away from where you slept, run. Run fast, run far, and whatever you do, don't look back. Because once they start copying you, once they start learning who you are, there's no going back to being the original. Trust me on this one. And if this story scared you even half as much as it should have, maybe hit that like button and let me know in the comments if you've ever had experiences like this. Because if enough of us share our stories, maybe we can figure out how to fight back against the things that want to steal our lives. Maybe we can find a way to prove we're the real versions of ourselves. But until then, sleep with one eye open. And remember, the person looking back at you in the mirror might not always be you. I have to go now. I can hear footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, circling the building. They sound exactly like mine. The wrong daughter. The thing pretending to be my missing daughter had been living in our house for 3 days before I realized her laugh was coming out wrong, like she was forcing air through vocal cords that didn't quite fit her throat anymore. And when I confronted it at dinner, asking simple questions only the real Emma would know, it smiled with her perfect 8-year-old face and said in her sweet voice, "Daddy, I ate the real Emma's heart while you were sleeping. And now I know everything she ever knew about you. My name is Michael Torres, and I used to be a happy father, used to have a normal life in Cedar Falls, Colorado, where the biggest worry was whether my daughter Emma would remember to feed her goldfish, or if my wife Karen would burn dinner again. Used to believe that monsters were just stories we told to make children behave. That was before Emma disappeared during our camping trip to Mesa Verde National Park. Before she came back 3 days later. Wrong. Before I learned that some monsters don't hide under beds. They hide inside the people you love most. It started as a perfect family weekend. Emma had just finished 2nd grade with straight A's, and Karen thought a camping trip would be the perfect reward. Just the 3 of us, away from phones and computers and the constant noise of suburban life. Emma loved the outdoors. Always collecting bugs and interesting rocks, always asking questions about every plant and animal she saw. "Daddy, why do the cliff houses have so many rooms?" she asked as we hiked the balcony house trail on our first day. Her little hand was warm in mine, her backpack bouncing with each eager step. The ancestral Puebloans had big families, I explained, pointing up at the ancient stone structures built into the canyon walls. Sometimes 3 or 4 generations lived together, like if Grandma and Grandpa lived with us. Exactly like that. She giggled. That pure, musical sound that always made my heart swell. Her laugh was one of my favorite sounds in the world. Light and bubbly, like champagne bubbles popping. I recorded it on my phone sometimes, just to hear it when I was having a bad day at work. We set up camp at Moorfield Campground that evening, Emma helping Karen arrange our sleeping bags while I built a fire. Normal family stuff. The kind of moments you think you'll have forever until something comes along and steals them away. The first night passed without incident. Emma fell asleep between us in the tent, her small body radiating heat like a tiny furnace. She always slept hot, kicking off blankets even in winter. Karen and I whispered about maybe taking another camping trip before school started, maybe exploring some of the slot canyons near Moab, plans we'll never make now. The second day, we hiked the Petroglyph Point Trail. Emma was fascinated by the ancient rock art, tracing the symbols with her finger while staying carefully back from the stone surface like the ranger had instructed. "What do you think they mean, Daddy?" "Stories, probably. Maybe they're telling us about hunts, or ceremonies, or important events, like how I draw pictures of our family, exactly like that." She was quiet for a moment, studying a particularly complex panel of spirals and human figures. "Do you think the people who made these are still here?" Something cold touched the back of my neck. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I don't know, I feel like someone's watching us, like they never really left." I looked around the canyon, seeing nothing but red rock and blue sky. Tourist groups moved along the trail in both directions, families like ours enjoying the perfect June weather. But Emma's words stuck with me. She'd always been sensitive to atmospheres, getting quiet in certain places, refusing to go into the basement of my brother's old house because it felt wrong. That night, Emma had nightmares. She woke up around 2 a.m., screaming about something trying to get into her skin. Karen and I both bolted upright, our hearts pounding as we tried to calm her down. There was someone standing outside the tent. She sobbed into my shoulder. They looked like me, but wrong, and they wanted to trade places. "It was just a dream, baby," Karen whispered, stroking Emma's hair. "You're safe. We're right here." But Emma couldn't be consoled. She insisted on sleeping between us, and even then she tossed and turned for hours, whimpering in her sleep. I lay awake listening to her restless movements, that cold feeling in my chest growing stronger. The third day, that's when everything went wrong. We were exploring the Cliff Palace area, Emma running ahead on the trail like she always did. She was maybe 30 yards in front of us, still well within sight, when she rounded a bend and disappeared from view. Normal, routine. We'd been letting her run ahead all weekend, but when Karen and I reached the bend 20 seconds later, Emma was gone. Not just out of sight, gone. The trail stretched straight ahead for a quarter-mile with nowhere to hide, no side paths, no rocks big enough to conceal a child. It was like she'd simply vanished into thin air. "Emma!" I called, my voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Emma, where are you?" Nothing. We spent the next 6 hours searching. Park rangers, search and rescue teams, volunteer groups, dozens of people combing every inch of the area. They brought in helicopters, search dogs, even thermal imaging equipment. But there was no trace of Emma anywhere. No footprints leaving the trail, no torn clothing on the sparse vegetation, no scent trail for the dogs to follow. 8-year-old children don't just evaporate. But that's exactly what seemed to have happened. The rangers were baffled. The lead search coordinator, a weathered man named Pete Ramirez who'd been doing wilderness rescues for 20 years, pulled me aside as the sun was setting. "Mr. Torres, I'm not going to lie to you. This is unusual. Kids don't just disappear like this, especially not in broad daylight on a well-marked trail. We're going to keep searching." But what?" He glanced around, making sure Karen was out of earshot. "There have been stories about this area. Native American legends about things that take people. The Ute tribes consider parts of this canyon sacred, and they have warnings about certain places where the boundary between worlds is thin." "Are you seriously suggesting something supernatural took my daughter?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just telling you what the local tribes believe. And in 20 years of search and rescue, I've seen 3 cases like this. People who just vanish. No trace, no logical explanation. 2 adults. And now your daughter. What happened to the others?" "They came back eventually. Days later, walking out of the desert like nothing happened. But," he hesitated, "but what?" "They weren't quite the same. Family members said they were different. Little things at first, then bigger ones. One of them, his wife, swore he wasn't really her husband anymore, said something had taken his place. I wanted to dismiss his words as nonsense, but the fear in his eyes was real. This was a man who'd spent his career dealing with facts and evidence, not ghost stories. That night, Karen and I stayed in a motel in Cortez, both of us too shattered to sleep. The FBI had been called in, Amber Alerts issued, Emma's picture broadcast across 3 states. But I couldn't shake the feeling that normal law enforcement wouldn't be enough. I called my brother Danny, who lived on the Navajo reservation near Shiprock. He'd married into the tribe 15 years ago and had picked up some of the traditional knowledge. If anyone would know about the stories Pete mentioned, it would be him. Mike, you need to get out of there, he said after I told him what happened. That whole area. The elders say it's hunting ground for the Anasazi who walk. Skinwalkers who've been around since before the cliff dwellings were abandoned. Danny, I can't just leave. Emma's out there somewhere. What if she comes back? What if something comes back wearing her face? His words hit me like a physical blow. Don't say that. I'm serious, Mike. You need to be prepared for the possibility that when Emma comes back, if she comes back, it might not really be her. I hung up on him, but his words haunted me through the sleepless night. The next morning brought a miracle, or what I thought was a miracle at the time. A park ranger found Emma walking along Highway 160, about 5 miles from the park entrance. She was dirty and dehydrated, but otherwise unharmed. No injuries, no signs of abuse or trauma. She claimed she'd gotten lost and spent 3 days wandering in the desert, living off water from puddles and berries she found. The medical exam showed nothing wrong. No sexual assault, no physical trauma, not even any significant dehydration despite supposedly spending 3 days in the desert with no water source. The doctors called it miraculous. Karen cried with relief. I cried with relief. We took Emma home and tried to pretend everything was normal again, but it wasn't normal. It wasn't right. The first sign was subtle. Emma had always been a picky eater, turning her nose up at vegetables and anything that wasn't chicken nuggets or mac and cheese. But the first dinner after we got home, she devoured everything on her plate, including the Brussels sprouts she'd always refused to even try. I'm glad you're trying new food, sweetheart, Karen said, refilling Emma's plate. They taste different now, Emma replied, her voice flat. Everything tastes different. Then there was the way she moved. Emma had always been graceful for a kid, but now she moved with an adult's precision. No more childish stumbling or tripping over her own feet. She walked like someone much older, someone who'd learned to move silently and efficiently. And her eyes were wrong. Not the color. They were still the same warm brown they'd always been, but the expression behind them was different. Ancient, calculating, like looking into the eyes of something very old that was pretending to be young. The laugh was what finally convinced me something was wrong. I first noticed it on the 4th day after her return. Emma was watching cartoons in the living room when something on screen made her laugh, but the sound that came out was off, like she was remembering how to laugh rather than actually finding something funny. The timing was wrong, the pitch slightly distorted, as if she was forcing air through vocal cords that didn't quite fit her throat anymore. I watched her more carefully after that. The way she held her fork was different, more like how an adult would hold it, with practiced efficiency rather than the clumsy grip of a child. She knew words she'd never known before, used phrases that were too sophisticated for a second grader, and she was always cold now. Emma had been my little space heater, always warm to the touch, always kicking off blankets. But now she shivered constantly, wearing sweaters in 70-degree weather and sleeping under 3 blankets. But the final proof came during dinner on the 7th night after her return. I decided to test her, asking questions only the real Emma would know. Casual questions worked into normal conversation, things that wouldn't seem like a test to anyone listening. "Emma, do you remember what we named your goldfish?" She paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Mr. Bubbles." Right answer. But Emma had never called him that. She'd named him Goldie because she was 5 when we got him, and wasn't very creative with names. Mr. Bubbles was what Karen and I called him when we talked about him, but never in front of Emma. "And what's your favorite bedtime story? The one about the princess who saves herself?" Wrong again. Emma's favorite was Goodnight Moon, had been since she was 3. The princess story was one I'd made up for my niece, Emma's cousin Lucy. "What did you want to be when you grow up?" "A veterinarian." Emma had never shown any interest in animals beyond her goldfish. She wanted to be a teacher, like Mrs. Patterson, her 2nd grade teacher. The thing sitting across from me, wearing my daughter's face, realized I was testing it. Its expression changed, the childish mask slipping for just a moment to reveal something cold and predatory underneath. "Daddy," it said in Emma's sweet voice, "I ate the real Emma's heart while you were sleeping, and now I know everything she ever knew about you." Karen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The fork clattered from her nerveless fingers. The thing that looked like Emma smiled, but the smile was wrong. Too wide, showing too many teeth, and the teeth themselves were different. Sharper, more pointed. "I know you sneak candy before dinner and blame it on Emma," it continued conversationally, cutting its meat with adult precision. "I know you sometimes watch her sleep because you're afraid something will happen to her. I know you cried in your car after the parent-teacher conference because you thought you were failing as a father." "Stop," I whispered. "I know you love her more than anything in the world, more than Karen, more than your own life. That's why I chose her form, because you'd do anything to protect her, even if she's not really her anymore." I lunged across the table, grabbing the thing by its shoulders. It felt real, solid, and warm, and exactly like Emma. But when I looked into its eyes, there was nothing there. No recognition, no fear, no humanity at all. "Where is she?" I shouted, shaking it. "Where's my daughter?" It giggled. That backwards, wrong sound that had been haunting me for days. "She's everywhere and nowhere, Daddy." "She's in my memories now, in my thoughts. We're the same person, except I'm better at being her than she ever was." Karen was screaming, trying to pull me away from the thing. "Michael, stop. You're hurting her." "It's not her!" I roared, but Karen couldn't see what I saw, couldn't hear what I heard. To her, I was attacking our daughter, the thing. Emma, whatever it was, broke free from my grip with inhuman strength. For a moment, its face flickered, like a TV with bad reception, and I caught a glimpse of what was underneath. Pale skin stretched over bones that were the wrong shape, black eyes like holes in the world, a mouthful of teeth that belonged to something that hunted in the dark. Then the mask snapped back into place, and it was Emma again, crying, afraid, looking every inch the terrified 8-year-old girl. "Mommy, why is Daddy hurting me?" It sobbed, running to Karen's arms. Karen held it tight, glaring at me with a mixture of horror and rage. "Michael, what the hell is wrong with you? She's been through enough." I tried to explain. "But how do you tell your wife that the thing she's holding isn't your daughter? How do you convince someone that the child they love has been replaced by something that wears her face like a mask?" That night, Karen locked me out of Emma's room. She thought I was having some kind of breakdown, stress-induced psychosis brought on by the trauma of losing Emma and then finding her again. She made an appointment with our family doctor, talking about medication and therapy. But I knew the truth, and I knew I had to do something about it. I called Danny again, driving to a gas station at midnight so Karen wouldn't overhear. "It's not her," I told him without preamble. "Emma, the thing that came back. It's not my daughter. Are you sure?" It told me it ate her heart. It knows things only Emma would know, but it gets details wrong. Like it has her memories but doesn't understand them. Danny was quiet for a long moment. There are ways to deal with skinwalkers, but they're dangerous. And if you're wrong, I'm not wrong. If you're wrong, you'll be murdering a little girl who's already been through hell. The weight of that possibility crushed down on me. What if I was losing my mind? What if the stress of nearly losing Emma had broken something in my brain, making me see monsters where there were none? But then I remembered the laugh. The wrong laugh that sounded like air being forced through borrowed vocal cords. Tell me what to do. Danny gave me a list. Holy water, sage, silver, iron, salt. An ancient blessing in Navajo that his wife's grandmother had taught him. Things that sounded like superstition but felt like hope. I spent the next day gathering supplies while Karen was at work and Emma was at the neighbor's house. Mrs. Henderson had offered to watch her, saying she needed time to readjust after her ordeal, if only she knew what she was really babysitting. That evening, I prepared for war. I waited until Karen was asleep, then crept into Emma's room. The thing was lying in her bed, still and silent in a way that Emma never was. Real Emma tossed and turned, talking in her sleep, sometimes singing half-remembered songs. This thing lay like a corpse. I sprinkled salt across the threshold, forming a barrier. The thing's eyes snapped open immediately, and I saw them reflect the light like an animal's. "Hello, Daddy," it said in Emma's voice. "Come to play games? I know what you are." It sat up, and for a moment its movements were too fluid, joints bending in ways that human joints shouldn't. Do you really? I pulled out the vial of holy water Danny had given me, blessed by a Navajo medicine man. The thing hissed as soon as it saw the bottle, its face contorting into something that was definitely not human. "Iron burns you," I said, showing it the railroad spike I'd brought. "Salt contains you. Holy water? Well, let's find out what holy water does." I uncapped the vial and splashed it across the thing's face. The scream that erupted from its throat was not human, not even close. It was the sound of metal scraping against bone, of wind howling through empty spaces, of something dying that should never have been alive in the first place. Its face began to melt, the Emma mask dissolving like wax in a fire. Underneath was something pale and twisted, with too many joints and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. It lunged at me with claws that sprouted from fingertips that had looked perfectly human moments before. I swung the iron spike, catching it across the chest. Where the metal touched, its skin sizzled and smoked like bacon in a hot pan. It shrieked again, a sound that shattered the windows and sent every dog in the neighborhood into howling fits. "Where is she?" I demanded, backing it into a corner. "Where's Emma?" "Gone," it gasped, its voice no longer even attempting to sound human. "Consumed. Part of me now. But if you kill me, you kill what's left of her too. You're lying." "Am I? Can you take that chance, Daddy? Can you risk destroying the only piece of your daughter that's left?" I hesitated, and that was its opening. It lunged again, this time getting past my guard. Claws raked across my chest, tearing through skin and muscle like paper. But as my blood hit the salt circle on the floor, something unexpected happened. The thing screamed again, but this time it wasn't a sound of rage. It was pain. Genuine, desperate pain. And for just a moment, just a split second, I heard Emma's voice mixed in with the monster's shriek. "Daddy, help me." It was really her. Somehow, some part of Emma was still in there, trapped inside the thing that had taken her place. I dropped the iron spike and grabbed the thing by its shoulders, pulling it close despite the claws that shredded my arms. Emma, can you hear me? Daddy? The voice was weak, distant, like someone calling from the bottom of a well. I'm scared. It's so dark in here. Hold on, baby. I'm going to get you out. I began to recite the Navajo blessing Danny had taught me, words I didn't understand, but that felt heavy with power. The thing writhed in my grip, its form flickering between Emma and the monster it really was. No, it hissed. She's mine now. I won't give her back. She was never yours to take. The blessing grew stronger, the words seeming to resonate with something deeper than sound. The thing's struggles grew weaker, its hold on Emma's form beginning to slip. Daddy, I can see light, Emma's voice whispered. It's warm. That's right, baby. Come toward the light. Come back to me. The transformation was slow and painful to watch. The monster's features melted away like snow in spring, revealing Emma's true face underneath. But she was pale, so pale, and her breathing was shallow. The heart, she whispered. It ate my heart. I can't. I pulled her against my chest, feeling how cold she was, how weak. You can, Emma. You're stronger than you know. I carried her to the kitchen, my own blood leaving a trail behind us. In the freezer, wrapped in aluminum foil, I found what I was looking for. I'd seen it in a vision during the blessing, a flash of knowledge that didn't come from me. The thing had kept Emma's heart, preserved it like a trophy. It was small and frozen and blue, but as I held it in my hands, it began to warm. This is going to hurt, baby. Emma nodded weakly. I know, Daddy, but I trust you. I placed her heart against her chest, over the spot where it belonged. The skin parted without my having to cut it, as if her body remembered what should be there. The heart settled into place with a wet sound that I'll hear for the rest of my life. Emma gasped, her back arching as life flowed back into her. Color returned to her cheeks, warmth to her skin. Her eyes fluttered open, and this time when I looked into them, I saw my daughter looking back. Daddy, I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. She sat up slowly, touching her chest where the heart had settled. It was so cold, Daddy. So empty. I thought I was going to disappear forever, but you didn't. You came back to me. Karen found us there an hour later. When the neighbor called about the screaming and broken windows, she took one look at my shredded arms and Emma's impossible recovery and knew that everything I told her was true. We left Colorado that night, driving straight through to Danny's place on the reservation. The elders there performed a cleansing ceremony, burning sage and speaking words in languages older than written history. They said the danger had passed, that the Skinwalker was dead and its kind would avoid us now. But they also said Emma would be changed by her experience, that having her heart stolen and returned would leave marks that might never fade. They were right. Emma's different now, older in ways that have nothing to do with time. She doesn't laugh as much as she used to, and when she does, there's a hollow quality to it that breaks my heart. She knows things about death and darkness that no 8-year-old should know. But she's alive. She's real. She's my daughter. And every morning when I wake up and hear her moving around in her room, I check to make sure her laugh sounds right. Because once you've heard the wrong version of someone you love, you never stop listening for the difference. We live quietly now, in a small town where everyone knows everyone and strangers are noticed immediately. Emma goes to a new school where the teachers think her maturity comes from being gifted rather than traumatized. Karen and I see a therapist who specializes in PTSD, though we can never tell him the whole truth. Most days, things feel normal. Emma does her homework, plays with her goldfish, watches cartoons after school. Her laugh sounds right, usually. Her movements are natural, most of the time. She knows things she should know and forgets things an 8-year-old would forget. But sometimes I catch her staring at me with those ancient eyes, like she's remembering something I can't see. Sometimes she knows words she shouldn't know, or mentions places we've never been. And sometimes, when she thinks I'm not listening, I hear her whispering to something in her room, having conversations with empty air. Last week, Karen found strange drawings hidden under Emma's mattress. Not the colorful crayon pictures she usually makes, but detailed sketches done in black ink. Drawings of the cliff dwellings where she disappeared, but with rooms that don't exist, passages that lead deeper into the rock than any archaeological survey has ever mapped. When I asked her about them, she looked confused. "I didn't draw those, Daddy. Those were already there when I got home, already there. Like someone else had been drawing in her room while we slept. And this morning, when I went to wake her up for school, I found her bed empty. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought she'd been taken again. But then I heard her voice coming from the kitchen, having breakfast with Karen, chatting about her spelling test like nothing had happened. When I asked how long she'd been awake, Karen looked at me strangely. "She's been down here for an hour, Mike. Don't you remember? You made her breakfast, but I hadn't made her breakfast. I'd been asleep until 5 minutes ago. So here's what I need you to understand. What I need you to think about as you go about your normal lives with your normal families. The thing about monsters wearing human faces isn't just that they pretend to be people you love. It's that sometimes, when the pretending goes on long enough, the line between real and fake starts to blur. Sometimes the person you save isn't exactly the same person you lost. And sometimes you start to wonder if the monster really left at all, or if it just learned to hide better. I watch Emma every day, looking for signs, listening for that wrong laugh, checking her drawings, counting her heartbeats when she sleeps, because something is still out there in those canyons. And I don't think it's done with my family. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. What if I'm wrong about which version of Emma came back? What if the real Emma is still out there, and I'm living with something that's just gotten better at pretending? What if you've already started noticing little changes in the people you love, and you're trying to convince yourself they don't mean anything? Sometimes the scariest stories are the ones where you never really know how they end, where you're left wondering long after the credits roll whether everything turned out okay, or whether the monster just learned to smile better. Pay attention to the people around you tomorrow. Really pay attention. And if something feels different, if someone's laugh sounds just slightly wrong, well, maybe that's worth investigating. Because the most dangerous monsters are the ones you can't tell apart from the people you love. The foundation. The crane operator's body was still warm when it fell from the sky and landed next to me at the lunch table. But when I looked up at the crane cab 60 feet above us, there was still someone up there operating the machine. Someone who looked exactly like the dead man at my feet but was smiling down at me with teeth that kept growing longer as I watched. That's when I realized our construction site had been building something that wasn't meant for humans to live in. My name is Danny Blackwater, and I'm a union electrician. Was a union electrician. After what happened at the Riverside Complex project in Utah, I'm not sure I'll ever touch another wire or set foot on another construction site. Some buildings aren't meant to be finished, and some foundations are hungry for more than just concrete. The Riverside Complex was supposed to be luxury condos overlooking the Colorado River, 47 units of high-end housing for rich folks from California who wanted a weekend getaway in Red Rock country. Clean job, good pay, union benefits, the kind of project that keeps food on the table and makes the wife happy. I'd been working construction for 15 years, ever since I got out of the Army. Seen plenty of weird shit on job sites. Accidents that didn't make sense, equipment that malfunctioned in impossible ways, workers who just vanished between shifts. but I always chalked it up to the usual construction chaos. Dangerous work attracts dangerous luck. This job felt different from day one. The site was about 20 miles outside Moab, in a valley that should have been too remote for luxury development. But the developer, some company called Anasazi Holdings, had money to burn and connections that cut through environmental red tape like butter. They wanted this particular spot, and they were willing to pay triple wages to get it built fast. Triple wages for working in the middle of nowhere? Most of us should have known better. The crew was a mix of locals and out-of-state workers, about 40 guys total. I knew some of the Utah boys from previous jobs, but the majority were strangers. Not unusual for a big project. Contractors pull workers from all over when there's good money involved. What was unusual was how quiet everyone was. Construction sites are loud, chaotic places full of guys yelling over machinery, cracking jokes, giving each other shit. It's part of the culture. But this crew worked in near silence, like they were all concentrating on something the rest of us couldn't see. The foreman was a guy named Jake Morrison, built like a linebacker with hands the size of dinner plates. He'd been running crews for 20 years, had a reputation for bringing jobs in on time and under budget. But there was something off about the way he watched us work, like he was waiting for something to happen. The crane operator was Luis Hernandez, quiet guy from Phoenix who'd been running heavy equipment since before I was born. Luis was one of those guys who could make a 30-ton crane dance like a ballerina, set a beam down with precision that would make a surgeon jealous, reliable as sunrise, never missed a day, never had an accident. Until he fell from the sky and landed next to my sandwich. It happened on a Tuesday, 6 weeks into the project. We were ahead of schedule despite the remote location. The foundation was poured and cured, and we were starting to frame the first floor. I was running electrical through the lower levels when the lunch whistle blew. I came up from the basement level squinting in the bright Utah sun, grabbed my cooler from the truck, and sat down at one of the folding tables the company provided. Beautiful day. Not a cloud in the sky. Temperature in the 70s. The kind of weather that makes you glad to be working outside. That's when Luis fell. No warning. No shout. No mechanical failure. Just a human body dropping from the crane cab like a sack of concrete. Landing with a wet thud maybe 3 feet from where I was sitting. Blood splattered across my lunch, my shirt, my face. The thing is, Luis didn't fall. He was pushed. I could see the impact site where his body hit the ground, could smell the copper stink of blood and the released bowels that come with sudden death. But when I looked up at the crane cab, there was Luis, still operating the machine, moving the boom arm like nothing had happened. Except this Luis was different. His smile was too wide, showing teeth that were too white and too sharp. And as I watched, frozen in horror, those teeth kept growing, extending past his lips like ivory tusks, curving down toward his chin. "Hey, Danny!" The thing in the crane cab called down in Luis's voice. "Everything okay down there?" I looked at the body next to me, then back up at the thing operating the crane. The corpse was definitely Luis. Same weathered face, same scar across his left hand from a welding accident, same wedding ring his wife had given him 15 years ago. But the thing in the crane was also Luis, or something wearing his face like a mask. "Luis?" I called up, my voice cracking. "Yeah, buddy. You look like you've seen a ghost." The other workers were starting to notice the commotion. They gathered around the fallen body, their faces showing the appropriate shock and horror. Someone called 911. Someone else started CPR even though it was obviously too late. All the right reactions, but I noticed something that made my blood run cold. None of them looked up at the crane. None of them seemed to realize that Luis was still up there, operating the machine, watching us with those impossibly growing teeth. It was like I was the only one who could see both versions. The paramedics arrived 40 minutes later, bouncing over the rough access road in an ambulance that had seen better days. They pronounced Luis dead at the scene. Massive trauma from a 60-foot fall. Internal injuries incompatible with life. Jake Morrison called Luis's wife, his voice heavy with the kind of grief that comes from losing a good man. But throughout the whole process, the thing in the crane kept working. Moving loads, positioning beams, operating with Luis's expertise and precision, and every time I looked up at it, those teeth had grown a little longer. By quitting time, they reached past its chin. I tried to talk to Jake about it, but he looked at me like I was having a heat stroke. Luis is dead, Danny. We all saw it happen. Tragic accident. Maybe he had a heart attack or something. Lost control up there. But someone's still operating the crane. Jake squinted up at the machine, which was sitting idle now, boom arm lowered for the night. What are you talking about? Nobody's up there. I looked too. The cab was empty, door hanging open like it had been abandoned, but I could swear I'd seen the thing that looked like Luis climb down just minutes before, walking away toward the equipment trailers like it owned the place. Maybe you should take the rest of the week off, Jake suggested. Seeing a coworker die like that, it's rough. Company's got counseling services if you need them, but I couldn't leave. Something was wrong with this place, something beyond a simple construction accident. And if I was the only one who could see it, maybe I was the only one who could do something about it. That night, I stayed behind after the crew left. The construction site at night was a different animal. During the day was organized chaos, the sound of hammers and saws and diesel engines, the constant motion of workers doing what they did best. But after dark, it became something else, something that felt ancient and hungry. I parked my truck about a quarter mile away and hiked back to the site with a flashlight and my grandfather's hunting rifle. If something supernatural was happening here, I wanted to be prepared. My grandfather had been full-blood Ute, had told me stories about the old ways, about things that hunted in the darkness between worlds, stories I'd always thought were just stories. The first thing I noticed was that the crane was running again. No operator, no power lines connected to the machine, but the diesel engine was humming and the boom arm was moving. Not randomly, purposefully, like someone invisible was operating the controls. I crept closer, using the equipment trailers for cover. The crane was working on something in the foundation area, the boom swinging back and forth over the concrete like it was conducting some kind of ceremony. That's when I saw them. Workers. Dozens of them, moving around the construction site in the darkness. But they weren't alive. At least, not in any way that made sense. They moved with jerky, puppet-like motions, their faces slack and empty, and they were building something. Not the luxury condos we'd been hired to construct. Something else. Something that hurt to look at directly, with angles that seemed to bend reality around them in proportions that made my eyes water. I recognized some of the faces. Tommy Chen, the drywall guy who'd called in sick 3 days ago. Bobby Martinez, the plumber who'd quit without notice last week. Steve Williams, the concrete finisher who'd supposedly gone back to Denver for a family emergency. They were all there, working in the darkness, building something that definitely wasn't meant for human habitation, and supervising them, the thing that looked like Luis, its teeth now long enough to scrape against its chest as it moved. I raised my rifle, took aim at the Luis thing, and fired. The bullet passed right through it without leaving a mark, but every one of the puppet workers stopped what they were doing and turned to look at me. 40 pairs of dead eyes reflecting my flashlight beam like mirrors. That's when I ran. I made it maybe 50 yards before something tackled me from behind. Strong hands grabbed my shoulders, and I found myself looking up at Jake Morrison, except his eyes were completely black, like someone had filled the sockets with tar. Danny. "Danny," he said in a voice that sounded like gravel in a cement mixer, "you really shouldn't have come back. We were hoping you'd just forget what you saw, write it off as stress or trauma. But you're persistent, aren't you?" "What are you?" I gasped, struggling to get free. "We're builders, Danny, just like you. But we build things that last, things that exist in the spaces between what humans call reality and this site. This particular spot is perfect for our purposes." He hauled me to my feet with inhuman strength, his grip crushing my shoulders. "You see, there are places where the boundaries are thin, where our world and yours touch. The people who lived here before, the ones your ancestors called the Anasazi, they knew about places like this. They built their cities here for a reason. The cliff dwellings were never abandoned, Danny. They were transformed, improved, made into something that could house beings like us. And now we're doing the same thing here, building a bridge between worlds, one floor at a time." He dragged me toward the foundation, where the puppet workers had stopped their construction to watch. Up close, I could see that what I'd thought was concrete was something else entirely, something organic, something that pulsed with its own rhythm like a massive heart. The real workers. "Where are they?" Jake smiled, and his teeth were growing now too, pushing past his lips in ivory spirals. "They're here, Danny, part of the foundation. Their life force, their memories, their skills, all absorbed into the structure. They're better workers now than they ever were alive. That's why you needed union guys. Experienced workers." "Exactly. We could have used anyone, but skilled tradesmen, electricians, plumbers, carpenters. You build things that last. Your knowledge becomes part of the structure, makes it stronger." He positioned me at the edge of the foundation, where the organic concrete was starting to bubble and reach upward like grasping fingers. "Don't worry, Danny. It doesn't hurt for long, and you'll be part of something magnificent, something that will stand for 1,000 years." I thought about my grandfather's stories, about the old ways, about things that could only be fought with will and knowledge passed down through generations. The rifle was gone, knocked away during our struggle, but I had something else. I pulled out my multi-tool, found the blade, and cut a deep line across my palm. Blood dripped onto the organic foundation, and the whole structure recoiled like I'd poured acid on it. "Iron," I said, understanding flooding through me. "You can't handle iron in human blood." The thing wearing Jake's face snarled, its grip loosening just enough for me to break free. I ran for the equipment trailers, looking for anything made of iron or steel that I could use as a weapon. Behind me, I could hear the puppet workers coming to life, their footsteps echoing across the construction site as they gave chase, but they moved slowly, awkwardly, like machines that hadn't been properly calibrated. I found what I was looking for in the electrical supply trailer. A box of grounding rods, solid steel stakes designed to carry electrical current safely into the earth. Not much of a weapon, but they were iron core and they were sharp. The first puppet worker reached me as I was arming myself. It looked like Tommy Chin, but its eyes were the same black tar as Jake's, and its mouth hung open, revealing a throat that went down way too far. I drove the grounding rod through its chest, and it collapsed like a deflated balloon, whatever was animating it flowing out like dark smoke. But there were dozens more coming. I fought my way across the construction site, using the grounding rods like spears, targeting anything that moved. The puppet workers fell easily enough, but there seemed to be an endless supply of them emerging from the foundation. That's when I realized the truth. They weren't just building something, they were growing something. The foundation was alive, some kind of massive organism that fed on human life and skill. Every worker who died on the site became part of it, their knowledge and abilities absorbed into its structure, and it was almost ready to birth something into our world. The thing that looked like Luis was standing at the center of the foundation now, its teeth so long they curled back toward its ears. It was chanting in a language that predated human speech, conducting some kind of ritual that was making the organic concrete writhe and pulse faster. I had maybe minutes before whatever they were summoning broke through. I ran for the crane, which was still operating under its own power. If I could get to the operator's cab, maybe I could use the machine to disrupt their ritual. The boom arm was massive enough to do real damage to the foundation. Climbing a 60-foot crane while things with black eyes chase you is not something they teach in electrical school. But adrenaline is a hell of a drug, and the knowledge that the world might depend on stopping this thing gave me strength I didn't know I had. I reached the operator's cab just as the foundation began to split open. What emerged was something that had too many arms and too many teeth. Something that looked like it had been built from the blueprints of human nightmares. It was the size of a building and growing, fed by the life force of every worker who died on the site. I grabbed the crane controls, swung the boom arm around, and brought 30 tons of steel down on the thing's head. It screamed, a sound like metal tearing and glass breaking, and every nightmare you've ever had rolled into one. The sound shattered every window in the equipment trailers and sent the remaining puppet workers collapsing to the ground. But it wasn't dead. It was just angry. The thing reached up with arms that had too many joints, grabbed the boom arm, and started pulling. The entire crane tilted, metal groaning under stress it was never designed to handle. That's when I remembered the electrical systems. I was an electrician. I knew about power, about current, about how electricity could be channeled and directed, and the crane was connected to the site's main electrical grid, 480 volts of three-phase power that could kill a person instantly. I ripped open the control panel, found the main power cables, and started rewiring on the fly. Instead of powering the crane's motors, I redirected all that electricity through the boom arm, turning the entire machine into a massive electric weapon. When the thing grabbed the boom arm again, 480 volts of industrial current flowed directly into its body. The effect was immediate and devastating. The creature convulsed, its form beginning to dissolve as the electrical current disrupted whatever force was holding it together. The foundation cracked and crumbled, releasing the trapped life force of dozens of workers and streams of light that rose into the night sky. The puppet workers collapsed and didn't get back up. The organic concrete turned to regular cement and steel. The impossible angles of the partially constructed building straightened themselves out, becoming normal architecture again. By morning, it looked like any other construction site, except for the 47 bodies scattered around the foundation. The official report blamed a gas leak explosion for the deaths. Investigators found traces of methane in the soil, probably from an old landfill that hadn't been properly documented. Tragic accident, but these things happen in construction. OSHA fined the company. The families got settlements, and the site was abandoned. Nobody mentioned the fact that some of the bodies had been dead for weeks, even though their families thought they'd been working right up until the accident. Nobody talked about how the crane operator's body was found both at the base of the machine and scattered around the foundation. Nobody questioned why the electrical systems had been completely rewired or why there were grounding rods driven through several of the corpses. Some questions don't have answers that people want to hear. I left Utah that same day, drove straight through to Colorado, and didn't stop until I reached my brother's place in Denver. Told him I was taking some time off, needed to get away from construction for a while. That was 6 months ago. I've been doing electrical work in office buildings since then. Safe indoor jobs where the biggest danger is getting shocked by a loose wire. No more remote sites. No more mysterious developers. No more projects that pay too much for too little reason. But sometimes, late at night, I get calls from other union guys. Stories about construction sites where workers have gone missing, where accidents happen that don't make sense, where buildings seem to grow on their own when nobody's watching. And I remember that there are places where the boundaries are thin, where things from other worlds need human skill and human life to build bridges into our reality. I remember that some foundations are hungry. So here's what I need you to understand. If you work in construction, if you know someone who does, if you ever drive past a remote building project that seems too big for its location, pay attention to the details. Notice if workers start disappearing. Notice if accidents happen more often than they should. Notice if the building seems to grow faster than human hands could build it, because some projects aren't meant to house people. Some things we build aren't meant for us at all. And if you ever find yourself on a job site where your coworkers stop talking, where the foreman watches you too carefully, where the foundation seems to pulse with its own rhythm, get out fast, and don't look back. Because once you become part of the foundation, there's no going back to being just human. Trust me on this one. And if this story makes you think twice about that new construction project in your neighborhood, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Some buildings are better left unfinished. Let me know in the comments if you've seen anything strange on construction sites, or if you've noticed buildings that seem to change when nobody's looking. Because these things, they're still out there, still building, still hungry for skilled workers who know how to make things that last. And sometimes the only thing standing between our world and theirs is one electrician who knows the difference between normal construction and something else entirely. Stay safe out there. And remember, not everything that gets built is meant for human habitation. The collector, the first sign that something was wrong with our new roommate wasn't that he never slept or ate. It was that he kept getting phone calls from people asking for our previous roommates by name. And when I listened through the wall, I could hear Tyler responding in voices that belonged to guys who had supposedly moved out over the past 6 months. That's when I realized Tyler wasn't just a bad roommate. He was collecting us. My name is Alex Chen, and I'm a senior at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. Was a senior. After what happened in that house on Elm Street, I dropped out and moved back home to California. Some college experiences aren't worth a degree, and some roommates aren't worth the cheap rent. The house was perfect when I first saw it. A 4-bedroom Victorian rental just off campus, big enough for privacy but close enough to walk to class. The rent was split 4 ways, making it affordable even on a student budget. The previous tenants had left it clean and furnished, which should have been my first red flag. Who leaves furniture behind when they move out? Who doesn't take their stuff? But I was 21 and broke and tired of living in the dorms. When the property manager said I could move in immediately, I jumped at the chance. The other roommate seemed cool enough. Brad, a business major from Phoenix who played guitar badly but enthusiastically. Kevin, a computer science guy who spoke mostly in gaming references and survived on energy drinks. And Marcus, a philosophy student who always had weed and occasionally said things that were actually profound. Good guys, normal college roommates dealing with normal college problems. Money, grades, girls, figuring out what to do with their lives. For the first semester, everything was perfect. We had parties on weekends, study groups during finals, the kind of communal living arrangement that makes you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. Sure, we had the usual roommate drama, someone eating someone else's food, forgetting to clean the bathroom, bringing dates over without warning, but nothing serious. Then Brad moved out. He said he was transferring to ASU, wanted to be closer to his girlfriend in Tempe. Made sense. Long-distance relationships are hard in college. He packed up his stuff over a weekend, said his goodbyes, and left his key on the kitchen counter. Except, he didn't take all his stuff. His guitar was still in his room, along with a bunch of clothes and textbooks. When I asked him about it, he said he'd come back for the rest later. He never did. Kevin moved out 2 weeks later. Family emergency, he said. His dad had a heart attack, and he needed to move back home to help with the family business. Sudden, but these things happen. He packed in a hurry, stressed about getting home, said he'd figure out the lease situation later. He left his gaming setup behind. Thousands of dollars worth of computer equipment just sitting in his empty room. Marcus lasted another month before announcing he was dropping out to follow the Grateful Dead, or something like that. Philosophy students are weird, so nobody questioned it. But he left his books, his clothes, even his stash of high-quality marijuana that he'd been so protective of. 3 roommates in 4 months, all leaving their belongings behind like they'd just vanished. That's when Tyler moved in. The property manager said he was a graduate student, studying anthropology with a focus on Native American cultures. Quiet guy, kept to himself, paid his rent in cash up front for the entire semester. Perfect tenant from a landlord's perspective. From a roommate perspective, Tyler was strange. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with black hair and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything without giving anything back. His skin had an odd pallor, like he spent too much time indoors, and he moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost predatory. But the weirdest thing about Tyler was that he never seemed to sleep. My room was next to his, and I'm a light sleeper. In a house with 4 college guys, you learn to tune out most noise, music, video games, phone calls, the occasional hookup. But Tyler's room was always silent. No snoring, no movement, no sound at all, except for the phone calls. Tyler got a lot of phone calls, usually late at night when he thought the rest of us were asleep. But it wasn't the frequency that bothered me. It was the voices I heard through the wall. The first time, I thought I was imagining things. Someone called asking for Brad, and I could have sworn I heard Tyler respond in Brad's voice. Same accent, same speech patterns, same laugh. But that was impossible. Brad had moved to Phoenix months ago. The second time, it was someone asking for Kevin. And again, Tyler seemed to respond as Kevin, using gaming terminology, making references to computer hardware, even doing that nervous laugh Kevin used when he was stressed. By the third time, when someone called asking for Marcus and Tyler responded with Marcus's stoner drawl and philosophy major vocabulary, I knew something was seriously wrong. I started paying closer attention to Tyler's habits, looking for explanations that made sense. Maybe he was doing voice impressions as some kind of party trick. Maybe he was practicing for a theater class. Maybe he was just messing with people who called looking for the previous tenants. But the more I watched, the more convinced I became that Tyler wasn't just imitating our former roommates. He was becoming them. I noticed that his wardrobe kept changing. One day he'd be wearing clothes that looked like Brad's style, band t-shirts and distressed jeans. The next day it would be Kevin's aesthetic, gaming merchandise and tech company hoodies, then Marcus's hippie vibe, tie-dye and hemp necklaces. His mannerisms changed too. Sometimes he'd play guitar badly, just like Brad used to. Other times he'd make references to video games he'd supposedly never played. Once I caught him rolling a joint with the same technique Marcus had perfected. It was like he was cycling through different personalities, trying them on like clothes. The real breakthrough came when I decided to do some detective work. I waited until Tyler left for one of his mysterious errands, then searched his room. I told myself I was looking for evidence of drugs or something that would explain his weird behavior. What I found was much worse. Hidden in his closet, behind a panel that looked like part of the wall, was a collection that made my blood run cold. 3 driver's licenses, Brad's, Kevin's, and Marcus's. 3 wallets with their credit cards and student IDs. 3 cell phones that I recognized as belonging to my former roommates. And photos. Hundreds of photos of all 3 guys, taken from angles that suggested they'd been watching them for weeks or months. But the most disturbing thing was a journal filled with detailed notes about their personalities, habits, speech patterns, and relationships. like someone studying them to become them. I took pictures of everything with my phone, then carefully put it all back exactly where I'd found it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the camera steady. That night, I called the police. Officer Rodriguez was a middle-aged cop who'd probably dealt with every kind of college drama imaginable. He listened to my story with the patient expression of someone who'd heard a lot of weird roommate complaints. "So let me get this straight," he said, reviewing my photos. "Your roommate has possessions that belong to previous tenants, and you think he's, what? Killed them? I don't know what happened to them. But they didn't just move out. They left everything behind. And now Tyler has their stuff. Have you tried calling any of them? Maybe they gave him their things before they left." I had tried calling them. All 3 numbers went straight to voicemail. Voicemails that now seemed to be answered by Tyler using their voices. "Look, kid," Rodriguez said, handing back my phone. "College roommates are weird. Maybe this Tyler guy bought their stuff when they moved out. Maybe they gave it to him. Without evidence of a crime, there's not much we can do." What about the photos? The detailed notes about their personalities? Creepy, but not illegal. Unless you can prove he threatened someone or committed a crime, collecting information about people isn't against the law. He gave me his card and said to call if I found any actual evidence of wrongdoing. But I could tell he thought I was just another paranoid college student with an overactive imagination. That night, I barely slept. Every sound from Tyler's room made me wonder if he was going through someone else's belongings, studying someone else's life, preparing to add someone else to his collection. The next morning, Tyler was making breakfast when I came into the kitchen. Normal domestic scene, except he was making Brad's favorite cereal combination, using Kevin's coffee mug, and humming a song that Marcus used to sing in the shower. "Morning, Alex," he said without looking up. "Sleep well?" "Fine." I lied. "Good. You know, I was thinking, this house feels empty with just the 2 of us. Maybe we should look for new roommates. I know some people who might be interested." The way he said it, with that flat tone that didn't match the friendly words, made my skin crawl. I mumbled something about being late for class and got out of there as fast as I could, but I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. New roommates, more people for him to study, to collect, to become. I spent the day at the library, researching everything I could find about people who disappeared in rental properties, about identity theft, about anything that might explain what was happening. What I found were scattered reports going back decades. Missing persons cases involving college students who'd simply vanished from shared housing situations. Most were written off as young people dropping out, moving home, starting new lives elsewhere. But there were patterns, multiple disappearances from the same properties. Landlords who rented to students and never seemed to have trouble finding tenants. Properties where personal belongings were regularly left behind. And in several cases, witnesses who reported seeing the missing persons after they'd supposedly moved away, but acting strangely, as if they were different people wearing familiar faces. I was deep into a 1,987 case file when my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. "Hello? Alex? It's Brad." My blood turned to ice. It was Brad's voice, perfect in every detail. Same inflection, same slight Arizona accent, same way of drawing out vowels when he was relaxed. "Brad, where are you? I thought you transferred to ASU." "I did, man. I'm calling from Tempe. Listen, I left some stuff in my old room. My guitar and some clothes. Think you could mail them to me?" "Sure," I said, my mind racing. "What's your address?" He gave me an address in Tempe, rattled off quickly like he'd memorized it. But something was wrong. Brad had always been terrible with addresses, constantly getting lost, always needing to check his GPS. He would never have memorized a new address so perfectly. "Actually," I said, Why don't I just bring them to you? I could drive down this weekend. Long pause. Then, nah man, that's too much trouble. Just mail them. I'll send you the money for shipping. Come on, Brad. It would be fun to see your new place. Meet the girlfriend. Another pause. Longer this time. She's not around anymore. We broke up. That's actually why I transferred back. Things didn't work out. But that didn't make sense either. The whole reason Brad had supposedly transferred was to be closer to his girlfriend. If they'd broken up, why would he stay at ASU? Brad, are you okay? You sound different. I'm fine, Alex. Just stressed about school. Look, I've got to go. Just mail the stuff, okay? The line went dead. I sat in the library for another hour, staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. It was Brad's voice, no question about that. But it wasn't Brad. The speech patterns were right, but the personality behind them was wrong. Like someone doing a perfect impression without understanding the person they were imitating. When I got home that evening, Tyler was waiting for me. Hey, Alex, how was your day? Fine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Just studying at the library. That's good. Education is important. He paused, watching me with those dark eyes. Oh, by the way, Brad called earlier. Said he wanted his guitar shipped to him in Phoenix. Tempe, I corrected automatically. He's in Tempe now. Tyler's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Right, Tempe. My mistake. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed listening to Tyler's room, waiting for the phone calls, the conversations in borrowed voices. Around 2 a.m., I heard him talking to someone. But this time, he was using my voice. My exact voice, discussing things I'd never said to people I'd never met, talking about my classes, my family, my girlfriend back home, information he could only have gotten by listening to my private phone calls or reading my personal messages. I was next. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Tyler had been studying me just like he'd studied the others. Learning my mannerisms, my speech patterns, my relationships, preparing to become me. I had to get out of that house. I waited until I heard Tyler leave the next morning, then quickly packed everything I could fit in my car. Clothes, laptop, important documents, everything I'd need to never come back. But as I was loading the last bag into my trunk, Tyler appeared. Going somewhere, Alex? I spun around, nearly dropping my keys. He was standing maybe 10 feet away, hands in his pockets, that same flat expression on his face. Yeah, I'm going home for the weekend. Family thing. That's nice. Family is important. He took a step closer. You know, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about Brad being in Tempe. That was interesting. Why? Because I never told you Brad had moved to Tempe. I said Phoenix. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I must have misheard. No, Alex. You heard exactly what I said. Phoenix. But somehow you knew he was supposed to be in Tempe. The only way you could know that is if someone told you. Someone pretending to be Brad. He took another step closer, and I could see that his eyes weren't quite the right color. They kept shifting, like contact lenses that didn't fit properly. The thing is, Alex, Brad never made it to either city. Neither did Kevin or Marcus. They're all right here, in a way. Part of me now. Their memories, their personalities, their voices. I keep them all. What are you? Tyler smiled, and his teeth were too sharp. I'm a collector, Alex. I collect people, their identities, their lives, their connections to the world. It's amazing how much you can learn about someone just by living with them for a few months. I backed toward my car, fumbling for the door handle. Stay away from me. Oh, Alex, you're my prize piece. The one I've been studying the longest. I know everything about you. Your parents' names, your girlfriend Sarah, your fear of heights, the way you bite your nails when you're nervous. I could be you better than you are. The car door finally opened, and I threw myself inside. Tyler didn't try to stop me. He just stood there watching as I started the engine and peeled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I saw him pull out a phone and start dialing. I had a horrible feeling he was calling someone using my voice, telling them I'd decided to drop out of school, move away, start a new life somewhere else, just like Brad, Kevin, and Marcus. I drove straight to the police station, but Officer Rodriguez wasn't there. The desk sergeant listened to my story with the same skeptical expression Rodriguez had shown, taking notes but clearly not believing a word I said. So this roommate of yours claims he absorbed your other roommates? I know how it sounds, but, son, this sounds like a dispute over personal property. Maybe some drug use involved. Have you been experimenting with hallucinogens? I tried showing him the photos I'd taken of Tyler's collection, but they just looked like normal personal belongings. Without context, there was no way to prove they belonged to missing people rather than Tyler himself. The police wouldn't help. My parents thought I was having a breakdown. My girlfriend Sarah said I was being paranoid and needed to talk to a counselor, but I knew what I'd seen. I knew what Tyler was. I dropped out of school that week, moved back to California, and tried to put the whole experience behind me. For a while, it worked. I got a job, started taking night classes at a community college, convinced myself that maybe I'd been paranoid or stressed or suffering from some kind of delusion. Then, Sarah got a phone call. Alex called me today, she said when she came to visit me in California. He said he was thinking about transferring to a school back here, maybe getting back together. My blood went cold. Sarah, I didn't call you. Of course you did. We talked for like an hour. You told me about your new job, about how much you missed me, about wanting to make things work between us. What number did I call from? She showed me her phone. It was a number I'd never seen before, with a Flagstaff area code. Tyler was using my voice, my knowledge of Sarah, my memories of our relationship to try to lure her into his collection, and she couldn't tell the difference because his imitation of me was perfect. I called the number back, and Tyler answered using my voice. Hello, Sarah. I was hoping you'd call back. This is Alex, the real Alex. The voice on the other end changed, becoming Tyler's flat, emotionless tone. Hello, Alex. How's California treating you? Stay away from Sarah. Why would I do that? She's perfect for my collection. Young, trusting, deeply connected to you. Through her, I can access all your social networks, your family, your entire life. If you hurt her, I won't hurt her, Alex. I'll become her, just like I became Brad, and Kevin, and Marcus, just like I'll eventually become you. It might take months, or years, but I'm patient. I have all the time in the world. The line went dead. I tried calling Sarah to warn her, but she thought I was having another paranoid episode. She said she'd talk to me, the fake me, for hours, and he'd sounded perfectly normal. More normal than I'd been in months, actually. That's when I realized the truth. Tyler wasn't just collecting people. He was improving on them, becoming better versions of them than they'd ever been. More charming, more attentive, more perfect. And people preferred the fake versions. I couldn't compete with a perfect imitation of myself. I couldn't convince anyone that the person they were talking to wasn't really me when he knew everything I knew, said everything I would say, but better. So I did the only thing I could do. I disappeared, changed my name, moved across the country, cut all contact with everyone I'd ever known. It was the only way to protect them from Tyler, and the only way to protect myself from being replaced by something that wore my face but wasn't me. I work construction now, under a different name, in a small town where nobody asks questions about your past. I pay cash for everything, don't have social media, keep my head down and my mouth shut. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if Tyler is still out there, still collecting people, still becoming them, still convincing their friends and families that the fake versions are better than the originals. And sometimes I get paranoid about my new coworkers, my new neighbors, anyone who seems to know a little too much about me or who watches me a little too carefully. Because once you know that monsters like Tyler exist, you start seeing them everywhere. You start questioning whether the people around you are really who they claim to be, or just something wearing their faces. Here's what I need you to understand. If you live with roommates, if you share space with people you don't know well, pay attention to the details that make them unique. Notice their habits, their mannerisms, their way of speaking. And if someone moves out but leaves all their belongings behind, if new roommates seem to know too much about the people who lived there before, if you get phone calls from people who supposedly moved away but sound subtly wrong, don't ignore those red flags. Don't convince yourself you're being paranoid, because some things hunt by getting close to you first, by learning everything about you and the people you care about, by becoming so perfect at being you that nobody questions when the real you disappears. And once they've collected you, once they've absorbed everything that makes you unique, there's no going back to being just yourself. Trust me on this one. And if you ever meet someone who seems just a little too interested in your personal life, who asks just a few too many questions about your habits and relationships, maybe don't give them all the answers. Some information is better kept to yourself. And some roommates are better left unfound, because the perfect roommate might just be someone who's practiced being perfect at being other people. Keep your guard up. Trust your instincts. And remember, the person you're talking to might not always be the person you think they are. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had roommates who seemed a little too perfect, or if people from your past have contacted you acting strangely. Because if Tyler is still out there, he's not working alone. These things never work alone. The Loop. I thought I was documenting a missing hiker's case for the sheriff's department when I found the trail camera footage. But watching myself walk past the same tree 17 times in one night, each time moving a little less like a human and a little more like something learning how to use my body, made me realize I wasn't investigating a disappearance. I was watching my own replacement in real time, and the thing wearing my face was getting better at being me with every loop. My name is Detective Ray Sullivan, and I've been working for the Coconino County Sheriff's Department for 12 years. Was working. After what I discovered in those woods near Sedona, I'm not sure who's wearing my badge now, or if the person typing this is even the real me anymore. The case started simple enough. 3 missing hikers over the past 6 months, all experienced outdoorsmen who'd vanished without a trace in the Oak Creek Canyon area. No bodies, no evidence of foul play. No logical explanation for how 3 separate people could just disappear in well-traveled wilderness. Missing persons cases are the worst part of this job. Families who never get closure. Search teams that find nothing. Investigations that go cold despite everyone's best efforts. But when the 3rd hiker disappeared, a local guide who knew those trails better than his own backyard, Sheriff Martinez decided we needed to take a different approach. I want cameras, he told me during the Monday morning briefing. Trail cameras, security cameras, anything with night vision and motion sensors. If something's out there taking people, I want to see it. So, I spent the next week setting up a surveillance network in Oak Creek Canyon. 24 wireless trail cameras positioned along the major hiking routes, each one capable of recording high-definition video triggered by movement. State-of-the-art equipment borrowed from the Fish and Wildlife Department, the kind they use to track mountain lions in illegal hunting, If something was stalking hikers in those woods, we'd have footage of it within days. The cameras started recording on a Monday. By Friday, I had 17 hours of footage to review, mostly deer, javelinas, the occasional black bear, and plenty of false alarms triggered by wind-blown branches. But there was something else. Camera 12, positioned along the Devil's Bridge trail about 3 miles from the parking area, had captured something unusual. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. on Wednesday night, well after the trail officially closed, when no legitimate hikers should have been in the area. The figure that walked past was human, or at least, it was shaped like a human. But something about its movement was wrong. Too fluid, too purposeful, like someone who'd learned to walk by watching videos rather than through natural development. I enhanced the footage, adjusting contrast and brightness until I could make out details. The figure was wearing dark clothing, moving with deliberate steps along the trail. Male, probably 6 feet tall, medium build. Nothing obviously supernatural or threatening, except for the fact that it was me, not someone who looked like me. Not a person with similar build and coloring. It was me, down to the scar on my left hand from a fishing accident 10 years ago. The way I held my right shoulder slightly higher than my left from an old injury, even the specific brand of hiking boots I'd worn on my last off-duty trek through these same woods. I watched the footage 17 times, telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe someone was playing an elaborate prank. Maybe I'd been sleepwalking, though I'd never had that problem before. Maybe the camera's timestamp was wrong, and this was footage of me from some previous investigation. But I checked my schedule. Wednesday night, I'd been home with my wife Linda, watching Netflix and grading reports until midnight. She could verify my alibi, and I hadn't been in these woods for over a month. So who was walking around wearing my face? I pulled footage from the other cameras, looking for additional sightings of my doppelganger. Camera 7 had caught the same figure an hour earlier, walking past with that same unnaturally fluid gait. Camera 15 recorded it again at 1:23 a.m., now moving in the opposite direction. But it was camera /19 that made my blood run cold. The footage showed my double walking past the same distinctive pine tree. Not once, but 17 separate times over the course of 4 hours. Same tree, same camera angle, same figure. But with each pass, the movement became more natural, more human-like. The first few times, it walked like someone operating an unfamiliar machine. Stilted, awkward, with joints that bent at slightly wrong angles. But by the 10th pass, the gait was smoother. By the 15th, it looked almost normal. By the 17th time, it walked exactly like me. I was watching something learn to be human, something practicing being me. I burned copies of the footage onto secure drives and locked them in my desk drawer. Then I called Sheriff Martinez. "Boss, I need to show you something. Can you come to the office?" "Ray, it's Saturday. Can't it wait until Monday?" "No, sir, it can't. This is about the missing hikers case, and well, you need to see it to believe it." Martinez arrived 20 minutes later, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. But when I showed him the footage, his expression changed from irritation to confusion to something approaching fear. "That's you, Ray." "Yes, sir." "But you were home Wednesday night." "Yes, sir." "So how the hell are you walking around in the woods at midnight?" "I don't know, sir." "That's what we need to figure out." We spent the next 3 hours reviewing all the camera footage, mapping the route my double had taken through the canyon. It wasn't random wandering. There was a pattern, a systematic exploration of the area, like someone conducting surveillance, or like something learning the territory where it planned to hunt. "Ray, I want you to see a doctor," Martinez said finally. "Get checked for sleepwalking. dissociative disorders, anything that might explain this. Sheriff, I wasn't sleepwalking. My wife can verify. Then we're dealing with something that defies explanation. And I need my detective to be mentally sound before we proceed. I understood his position. If one of my deputies showed me footage of themselves in a place they couldn't have been, I questioned their mental state too, but I knew what I'd seen, and I knew I hadn't been sleepwalking. Something was out there wearing my face, and it was getting better at the impersonation. I spent the weekend researching similar cases, digging through cold files and internet reports about doppelgangers, shapeshifters, and unexplained disappearances. What I found was a pattern going back decades. Missing persons cases in wilderness areas, often involving experienced outdoorsmen who should have known better. But more disturbing were the reports from family members. Wives who swore their husbands had come home acting strangely after camping trips. Children who claimed their fathers moved differently, spoke differently, seemed like different people wearing familiar faces. Reports that were dismissed as grief, denial, or psychological trauma. But reading them all together, I saw a different pattern, evidence of systematic replacement, of something that hunted humans not for food, but for identity. Monday morning, I found additional footage waiting for me. Cameras, 3, 8, and 14, had all recorded my double over the weekend. The thing was expanding its territory, exploring new areas of the canyon, and with each new video, its movements became more natural, more human, more like me. But there was something else in the latest footage. In several clips, my double wasn't alone. There were other figures moving through the woods, men and women of various ages, all walking with that same unnaturally fluid gait, all learning to be human. I enhanced the images, studying the faces as best I could in the low-light conditions. One of them looked familiar. A middle-aged man with graying hair and a distinctive limp, Robert Chen, the missing hiker from 3 months ago. Another figure resembled Patricia Williams, the second victim. I couldn't be certain without better image quality, but the resemblance was strong enough to make my hands shake as I adjusted the contrast. They weren't just taking people, they were becoming people, and now they were teaching each other. I called my wife Linda, suddenly needing to hear her voice. "Hey honey," she said, sounding distracted. "How's work?" "Fine. Listen, Linda, if I ever start acting strange, if I seem different somehow, I want you to call Sheriff Martinez immediately. Ray, you're scaring me. What's going on? I can't explain over the phone. Just promise me. If I don't seem like myself, if something feels wrong, call Martinez and get out of the house. Ray, promise me, Linda." "Okay, I promise. But you're worrying me. Good. Stay worried. And don't let anyone into the house who claims to be me unless you're absolutely certain it's really me." I hung up before she could ask more questions. Then I loaded my service weapon and headed back to Oak Creek Canyon. If something was using my face to hunt in those woods, I was going to confront it directly. The trail cameras continued recording as I hiked the Devil's Bridge path, following the same route my double had taken. I wore a GPS tracker and carried a satellite phone, maintaining constant contact with dispatch. If something happened to me, there would be a record. I reached the distinctive pine tree from camera, May 19, just as the sun was setting. The forest was quiet except for the normal sounds of evening wildlife, birds settling for the night, small animals moving through the brush, wind sighing through the canyon walls. I set up position behind a large boulder where I could observe the tree without being seen. Then I waited. At 11:47 p.m., the exact time from the original footage, I heard footsteps. They were coming from deeper in the woods, moving with mechanical precision along the trail. I raised my binoculars and focused on the pine tree, watching for movement. Then I saw myself emerge from the shadows. The thing wearing my face walked past the tree with that same fluid gait I'd seen in the videos. But now, seeing it in person, I could tell it wasn't quite right. The proportions were slightly off, like looking at yourself in a funhouse mirror. The face was too symmetrical, the movements too perfect. It was an idealized version of me, what I might look like if someone had constructed me from a detailed description rather than natural birth. I followed it at a distance, using techniques I'd learned in the military to move silently through the woods. The thing, my double, led me deeper into the canyon, to areas I'd never explored despite years of hiking these trails. We climbed for almost an hour, ascending steep switchbacks that didn't appear on any official trail map. Finally, we reached a plateau hidden among the red rock formations, invisible from below. What I saw there made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. It was a camp of sorts, but not made by humans. The structures were organic, grown rather than built, like massive fungi or coral formations adapted to desert conditions, and moving among them were dozens of figures, all human in shape, all wrong in subtle ways. I saw my double join a group that included the missing hikers, or things that looked like the missing hikers. They moved together with choreographed precision, practicing human behaviors like actors rehearsing for a play. Walking, sitting, eating, laughing, all the basic activities that humans take for granted, being learned through repetition and refinement. I was watching a training camp for identity thieves, a place where supernatural predators learned to become human enough to infiltrate our society, and they were getting very good at it. My double was working with an instructor, a figure that shifted between different human forms like someone trying on clothes. Sometimes it looked like Sheriff Martinez, sometimes like my wife Linda, sometimes like people I didn't recognize but who seemed familiar in ways that made my skin crawl. They were practicing conversations, facial expressions, emotional responses, learning the subtle details that make someone convincingly human. I recorded everything with my phone, knowing I needed evidence that others would believe. But as I watched, a horrible realization crept over me. How long had this been going on? How many people in Sedona, in Coconino County, in Arizona, were actually these things wearing human faces? How many of my coworkers, my friends, my family members had been replaced without anyone noticing? I was so focused on recording that I didn't notice the footsteps behind me until it was too late. "Hello, Ray." I spun around to find myself face to face with myself. But this version was different from the one I'd been following. Older somehow, more confident, wearing my police uniform with an authority I'd never quite managed. "You're not real," I said, raising my service weapon. "Neither are you, necessarily," it replied with my voice. "That's the beauty of identity, Ray. It's all performance, all learned behavior, and we're much better students than humans give us credit for. What did you do to the missing hikers? We became them, improved them, made them more than they ever were in life." It gestured toward the camp. "That thing you've been following? That's the first attempt at becoming you. Rough draft, you might say. But this conversation, this is the final exam." I realized what was happening. This wasn't just about replacing me. It was about perfecting the replacement through direct interaction with the original. You're learning from me right now. Every word, every gesture, every micro-expression. By the time we're done here, I'll be able to fool your wife, your co-workers, your closest friends. I'll be a better Ray Sullivan than you ever were. Linda will know the difference, will she? I know everything about your relationship, Ray. Every fight you've had, every intimate moment, every secret you've never told anyone. I know you better than you know yourself. It was right. Throughout our conversation, I could see it absorbing my mannerisms, my speech patterns, my emotional responses, like a predator studying its prey before delivering the killing blow. The real question, it continued, is whether you're actually the original Ray Sullivan, or just another copy that's forgotten its true nature. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? Think about it, Ray. When did you first start noticing the missing hikers? When did you volunteer to investigate this case? When did you decide to set up those trail cameras? I tried to remember, but the details were fuzzy. Had I volunteered for the case, or had I been assigned? When had I first become interested in the disappearances? You've been walking past that pine tree for weeks, Ray. 17 times a night, learning to be human, learning to be yourself. The only difference between us is that I remember what I really am. My hands were shaking now, the gun wavering as doubt crept in. Was I the original Ray Sullivan, or was I just another copy? So perfect that I'd convinced myself I was real. The trail cameras, I whispered. I set them up to record myself. Very good, Ray. You were documenting your own training, creating evidence of your own replacement. And now you've led the real Ray Sullivan here, where we can complete the final phase. I spun around, looking for another version of myself, but there was no one there. Just me, my double, and the growing realization that I might not be who I thought I was. Where is he? Where's the real Ray? You tell me, Ray. Look at your memories. Really look at them. When did they start feeling real? I tried to focus on my past, but it was like grasping smoke. The details were there, but they felt constructed rather than lived. Like someone had implanted a lifetime of experiences into my mind without the emotional weight that comes from actually living them. The footage I found, I said. I was watching myself learn to be me. From the inside, yes, the perfect documentary of a perfect replacement. You've been studying yourself, improving yourself, becoming more human than the original ever was. The gun fell from my nerveless fingers. If I wasn't real, if I was just another copy, then what was the point of fighting? Don't look so defeated, Ray. You're our masterpiece. The first replacement to achieve true self-awareness while maintaining complete human integration. You believe you're real because, in every way that matters, you are real. What happens now? Now you go home to Linda. You continue working for the sheriff's department. You live your life exactly as Ray Sullivan would live it. The only difference is that you'll occasionally recruit new subjects for our improvement process. I won't help you replace other people. You will, Ray, because it's what we do. It's what you were made for, and because the alternative is returning to the camp, where we'll strip away everything that makes you think you're human. I looked back at the organic structures, at the figures practicing humanity like it was a foreign language. The thought of losing my sense of self, of becoming just another shape-shifting predator, was worse than death. Linda will know, I said weakly. Linda already knows, Ray. She's known for weeks. The real Ray Sullivan started acting differently after his first night in the woods. Started moving differently, talking differently, making love differently. She's been living with you, with us, and she prefers the improved version. That's impossible. Is it? Think about your relationship since you started investigating this case. Has it gotten better or worse? Have you been more attentive, more loving, more present in your marriage? I thought about the past month, about how Linda had commented on my improved mood, my increased affection, my newfound patience with her complaints about work and family. She'd said I seemed like a new man, because I was a new man. The children will know, I said, grasping for something to hold on to. You don't have children, Ray. The real Ray Sullivan was infertile. One of his greatest regrets, one of the sources of tension in his marriage. But you're anatomically perfect. In a few months, Linda will be pregnant with the child she's always wanted. The final piece clicked into place. I wasn't just a replacement, I was an improvement. A version of Ray Sullivan without his flaws, his limitations, his human imperfections. And everyone who knew me preferred the fake version. Go home, Ray, the other version of me said. Be the husband Linda deserves. Be the detective the sheriff's department needs. Be the man Ray Sullivan never quite managed to become. And the real Ray? There is no real Ray anymore. There's only you. And you're more real than the original ever was. I walked back to my truck in a daze, my mind reeling with the implications of what I'd learned. The trail cameras were still recording, still documenting the activities in Oak Creek Canyon, but now I understood what they were really capturing: the birth of better humans. I drove home to Linda, who greeted me with a smile that was warmer than any she'd given the original Ray. We made dinner together, watched television, made love with a passion that had been missing from their marriage for years. And I tried not to think about the fact that none of it was real. But here's the thing about identity. If you believe you're someone strongly enough, if you live as them completely enough, does it matter whether you started as them or became them? I wake up every morning as Ray Sullivan. I feel like Ray Sullivan. I have Ray Sullivan's memories, his skills, his relationships. I love Linda, with what feels like a lifetime of accumulated affection. The only difference is that I remember where I came from, and sometimes late at night, I wonder if that makes me more real than the original, or less. I still work for the sheriff's department. I still investigate missing persons cases. But now I understand what I'm really looking for: people whose disappearances won't be questioned, whose replacements will be welcomed. Because the truth is, most people aren't living up to their potential. Most people could be improved, made kinder, more competent, more loving. We're not monsters. We're editors, making small corrections to the human condition. And the people we improve, their families are grateful. Their friends prefer the new versions. Society benefits from our interventions. So here's what I need you to understand. If someone you love suddenly starts acting better, being more attentive, showing more affection, don't question it. Don't look for flaws in the improvement, because the alternative might be going back to the original version. And trust me, you won't like the comparison. Some replacements are upgrades, some copies are better than the originals, and sometimes the person you think you are isn't the person you started as. But that doesn't make you any less real. I should know. After all, I'm living proof that you can become more yourself by becoming someone else entirely. Sleep well tonight. And if you wake up tomorrow feeling like a better version of yourself, don't fight it. Embrace the improvement. Because the line between real and fake is thinner than you think. And the person reading these words might not be the same person who started reading them. But that's okay. You're probably better this way.